I would like to welcome all of you to PIER Economics Seminar. Okay, and it is an honor today to have a Dr. Rodrigo Pereira to give a seminar under the topics, Are the loans of state-owned banks politically motivated? Before we proceed with the seminar, I would like to give an introduction to Dr. Rodrigo Pereira. So Rodrigo is now a visiting scholar at the Ksesat University. He also works at the IPEA, or the Institute for Applied Economics Research, which is a Brazil think tank located in Brasilia and Rio de Janeiro. And the think tank is being financed by the Brazilian government. And before working at the IPEA between 2020 and 2022, Rodrigo worked as an economic advisor at the Brazilian Ministry of Finance. And he received a PhD in economics from Cornell University. So regarding the format of presentation, okay, we have a total of 1 hour, including presentation and the Q&A. So if you have any questions, you please feel free to interrupt. So the audience on site, okay, please raise your hand, and for the online participants, okay, please use the raise hand button in the Microsoft Teams. So without further delay, may I give the floor to Rodrigo? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Well, let me start by thanking the invitation for presenting my work here at PIER and the Bank of Thailand. So this is a joint work with João Ricardo Faria, Eric Figueiredo, and Jaime Aurilio. And it's a work about public banks. More specifically, we're going to look at one particular public bank, which is Brazil's main development bank. It's called the BNDES, which is a national bank of social and economic development. And this bank is really big in Brazil. It finances a lot of projects in mostly in infrastructure projects and projects that expand industrial capacity. And they have a big and rich data set that is available on the website, and it's microdata. So every firm in Brazil or every individual who picks up a loan from BNDES, it's going to be there in this website. And so we have a panel of several years, 17, we end up with 17 years. And what we do is we aggregate this data in municipalities, right? So our main point of observation is the city. So if you have CTA, everybody that is located in CTA that pick up loans with this bank, so we aggregate that and we have a number for that city for every point in time. So we have a big panel of observations. And the idea here is to mix this data with data from the Superior Electoral Court in Brazil. That court also has a very rich data set, which is also available online. And basically, we are interested in the political affiliation of every mayor in every Brazilian city. And we want to match that political affiliation with Brazil's president political affiliation, right? So basically, we have two possibilities. Either the mayor is allied with the federal government. They could be from the same political party, or they could be from the same coalition of parties, or it could be opposition. It could be a foe. I say it's either friend or foe, right? And essentially what we want to ask, what we want to try to answer is the following question. Is it the case that the bank distributes its loans with some sort of political bias, giving more money for the allied municipalities? That's what we want to look at, right? So we do basic econometrics, we do like panel data estimation, and we build dummy variables. And we have two basic dummy variables. We have one that we call party dummy. So you get one if that city's mayor is of the same political party as the president of Brazil, and zero otherwise. And we have another dummy variable that we call coalition dummy. And then we're going to have one if the mayor is in the same coalition of parties as the president of Brazil, and zero otherwise. Brazil is one of the biggest democracies in the world. Everybody there is elected. Mayors are elected. The lower house, the city lower house or city congress, these guys are also elected. And Brazil's president is also elected. And every 4 years we have an election for the president, and every 4 years we have election for mayors, but they do not coincide in time. They're kind of mismatched. So every 2 years we have an election in Brazil. It could be presidential election, and also the governors of states are elected in the same presidential election. And 2 years later we have a mayor's election for mayors. So city level, municipality level election. Okay. Okay, so that's the summary of what we do. And then we build these dummy variables, and then with the variables we can do like very simple stuff like panel data estimation. And basically, if those dummies have statistical significance, that's evidence that there's something going on. Of course, we control for a bunch of municipal attributes, because cities with higher GDPs, they tend to have higher disbursements from the development bank, of course. Also, cities with a higher share of industry on municipal GDP, they also tend to have more money from this bank. And other variables that we use are related to like shares of activities in GDP, human capital. We want to see maybe if you have higher human capital or lower human capital. So we take a data set of labor. And also we use transfers from federal government and state government to each city. Okay. And then we do some difference in difference estimation. Basically, after that, we do some robustness checks. We do some fancy econometrics and try to get an answer for that question. And we find evidence that there is political motivation, or that, in fact, cities that are friends with the federal government get more money, because the federal government appoints the CEO of the development bank. It's not an independent bank. It's not like an independent central bank. Brazil's central bank is independent. Our central bank governor, he has a fixed mandate, and Brazil's president cannot fire him. So it's an independent central bank, much like the US central bank. But development banks or government-owned banks are not independent. So the president of Brazil, which is an elected politician, he appoints these CEOs of these banks. And it's very much the case that these CEOs would try to please the elected politician, right? And I think it's reasonable to think, well, if he's pleasing, he might very well direct the loans to municipalities that are friends, because loans boost economic activity. They create jobs, and people in those cities get happy, and they will be more prone to re-elect their mayors if they're happy, right? And by the same token, if you starve cities with opposition mayors, from this money from the development bank, you might get people that are not that much happy, and they're more prone to not re-elect that guy, which is a foe, right? So they will be more prone to maybe change the mayor and choose a mayor that is from the ruling coalition, something like that. Okay, so let me go into more details on the things I just summarized. The idea is that state-owned banks, the goal of them is to correct imperfections, right? We have the problem of information asymmetry in the credit market. And then the outcome of a market, purely like market with no government intervention, would be way too risky receiving credit when perhaps shouldn't, and this credit will come with a high interest rates. So government with the banks, with the government-owned banks, interferes in the government and breaks this thing by offering lower interest rates. And then hopefully that would fix market failure, right? And just like I said, the problem is that state-owned banks have their CEOs appointed by an elected politician, and elected politicians, they want power, and they get power with votes. So their objective function may not be to allocate those loans in the most efficient way for the society, but rather allocate in a certain way that gives them the maximum amount of votes. That's the conflict we have here. And so state-owned banks, they are vulnerable to political pressure, right? Brazil has 3 major banks owned by the federal government. These 2 first ones there are commercial banks. They have branch offices, they have checking account, banking account, savings accounts. But we are going to be looking at BNDES, which is a development bank, like I mentioned before. It has no branch offices. And the goals of BNDES are basically reducing capital constraints and promoting industrialization and infrastructure projects. In Brazil, we had a socialist administration between 2002 to 2016. It was a left-leaning government. And this government financed a number of infrastructure projects outside of Brazil, mostly in countries that were politically allies of Brazilian government, such as Cuba and Venezuela and Angola. And those loans were hugely criticized. They end up being subject of an investigation in the lower house of Congress in 2019. And I believe some people, I'm not sure exactly what happened after that, but some people might have been indicted. And I think that the bank's governance improved a lot after these 2019 investigations. But the fact is that there was a lot of scrutiny on BNDES international loans, particularly because some of those loans were not paid. Some of these countries defaulted on those loans. These are pretty much failed nations, right? Like Cuba and Venezuela, they're super poor. And but not much scrutiny has been placed over the distribution of loans inside Brazil, over the municipal distribution of loans. And that's where we want to, look at. We have 2 definitions of allied municipalities. like I mentioned, well, we have one in which the mayor has the same political party of Brazil's president. And we have another definition, a bit more loose, in which the mayor and Brazil's president belong to the same coalition of parties that elected Brazil's president. Okay. Brazil has 29 political parties, so it's not like the US that has Republicans and Democrats. No, we have 29, which means that in order to win one election, you have to have a coalition, a strong coalition, because one single party alone is too weak to win. So they form coalitions. Normally, the coalition that is formed at federal level also is replicated at state level and municipality level, but that's not a rule. I would say that the exception of the rule is to have different coalitions, but we don't consider that. So when we build the dummy variable, we consider the coalition at the federal level as the coalition. Okay. So we want to see if there's political interference in BNDES loans from a municipal perspective. And of course, we control for a bunch of attributes, municipal attributes, population, GDP, share of industrial output on GDP. Okay. And then we want to see if allied municipalities receive more loans, if there is some part of that difference that is not explained by municipal attributes. And basically, we will look at the coefficients of these dummy variables and see if they're significant or not, and their sign. Yes, yes.
Yeah, perhaps before we go on, how does this BNDES being financed, and how are they governed? Like, for example, for a state-owned institution like Thailand, we even have an independent institution that every year they kind of have a specific KPI for each and every state-owned institution, and they finance accordingly. So yeah, how?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I understand your question. Is it about BNDES governance or how they
So first
control
of all,
that?
they don't accept the deposit. So how do the financing from? And once, suppose the government finance it, how do they report in terms of performance? And to be able to renew the financing from the government, and so on. Do they have to abide on some sort of set of KPI that the government,
Yeah, I'm not sure I know how to answer that. I mean, this is like detailed BNDES loan procedures, right? I know the basics. I know that they have a share of their loans that is automatic. Those are typically small loans. So they use the network of banking branch offices of other banks in small municipalities. And I think it's from 10 million to 250 million Brazilian reais. I think it's something like that. Then you could use automatic loans in which you go to the branch office and you don't have BNDES supervision. It's almost like as if you have an infinite supply of loans because they're too small compared to the bank size. And then if you, as a borrower, if you satisfy a certain rules or certain attributes, then you get the loan without BNDES supervision. It's just given, right? For higher loans, then this is non-automatic loans. Then there is BNDES supervision, and they will. I don't know how the decision is taken. That I don't have those details, those informations. But what I can tell you is that through the period that we are investigating, automatic loans, they are a small fraction of the overall loans. They're like 6%, sometimes most of the years they're below 10% of the overall amount of loans. These smaller loans in which you don't have BNDES supervision, right? Yeah, and they also have what they call direct and indirect. And when they use this network of branch offices spread through Brazilian territory, they call it indirect because you go to another bank to pick up the loan, even though it's BNDES money. But some of the loans are direct, so you have to go straight to BNDES, usually the more sophisticated projects that involve a lot more money, so they go straight to BNDES.
Right. But as a BNDES, as an institution, do they have specific objective, like, for example, to reduce
Yes,
inequality or what? And
they
do they
have.
have board governing so that, you know, every year they have to report the outcome of what they do?
They have objectives of improving industry in Brazil, objectives of improving infrastructure. Yeah, maybe I should have looked at their. They certainly have on their website their. Maybe I should have looked more carefully at that.
Because I assume that also explain, you know, how they do things, right? I mean, if they have a very well board of that governing for a particular outcome as a whole bank, I mean that might be some sort of might offer some sort of governing. Then.
Yeah. I know that after that period, after the investigation in the lower house, governance improved a lot, and yeah, but I don't have much information on the details on how they evaluate projects and things of that nature. But we are just looking at the data, okay? So what can data tell us about? And there has been some related works about political interference in public banks, government banks loans. I mentioned here Sapienza work, 2004, with data, with Italian data, then Cole 2009 for India, Khwaja and Mian 2005 Pakistan. Dink 2005 used the panel data with a lot of emerging countries, finding that in election years, public-owned banks tend to raise disbursements as compared to private banks. And there's a difference of 11% to that. In Brazil, there's also a literature on government-owned banks. Bonomo, 2015, and co-authors, they look at the 2008 large expansion of public bank credit that happened in Brazil, and they showed that it benefited mostly who didn't need to be benefited, mostly big firms who already had access to credit. And the result of that is that there was not much of a boost in investment because the guys who needed most didn't get it. Claessens, 2008, he shows that electoral campaign contributions by firms or donations, they imply a number of political favors later on, one of them being larger access to bank loans, public bank loans. And Carvalho, 2014, perhaps is the work that is closest to ours, in the sense that he's going to look at regions, but he's actually trying to look at the matching between governors and the federal government, whereas we're looking at municipalities. And he shows that firms would expand jobs in politically attractive regions during electoral years in exchange for bank loans with low interest rates. And in his case, politically attractive regions could be regions where you have a mayor or a governor which is allied to the president, but he's so much, there's, I mean, the prospects of him being reelected are so high that you don't need to spend government money there to raise his prospects because he's going to win anyways. And also in places where there's not a tight race for the election. They don't give much money to those places, but rather firms would expand jobs in places where the race is tight for re-election, right? Okay, so we use data of Brazil's Superior Electoral Court. It's called Electoral Data Repository, and it has information of every candidate, either if he wins or not, for every political position. And we actually had to clean that data set because we're interested only on mayors, and we're interested on the mayors who won elections. And we are interested in their political affiliation. That's what we get on that data. This image shows how elections happen in Brazil. Here in this upper part, we have presidential elections in the years in which they take place. This is the final of the year. So 2002 election takes place in the end of 2002, and the winner takes office in 1st of January of the next year, 2003. And you see that the years don't match with the municipal elections. They are 2 years apart, right? So when we build dummy variables, we see that sometimes there is re-election. In 2006, President Lula da Silva was re-elected. So there's no change in the party dummy, right? Party dummy becomes the same if you are here and you are a mayor that belongs to the same party as Lula da Silva. Here, you still belong to the same party. But coalitions change. So Lula was elected in 2006 with a different coalition than when he was elected in 2002. So the coalition dummy changes a lot more through the years than the party dummy. And that's a good thing from an econometric perspective, right? You want your variables to change. The more they change, the more variation you have. And we build 2 dummy variables, the party dummy and the coalition dummy. The party is equal to 1 if the mayor and president are of the same party, and 0 otherwise. And the coalition is 1 if the mayor belongs to the coalition that supported the elected president. This is just little details here. More details about the data. Sometimes you have supplementary elections, so we consider the result of the last election. When there is, for instance, some corruption scandal in one election, then they run a supplementary election, and we consider the result of that supplementary election. Also, some details about the impeachment of Brazil's president in 2016. We could have excluded 2016 from our data set, but we decided to consider it the whole year as if it was government by Rousseff's successor, which was Temer. And there are reasons for that. Okay, so the data, the BNDES data, is micro level data. We aggregate on each Brazilian city, municipality. So we have disbursements. If you have municipality A, we have the disbursements made by BNDES for every firm and individual in that municipality. Sometimes the investment is made in more than one municipality. It's a road, it's a railway, and we exclude those loans from our data set when there's no municipality, no single municipality. And also sometimes the investment is made in a different city from where the firm is located and from where the credit is taken, but we don't care. We just look at where the investment is made. So those are the rules for building this data set. We have a bunch of control variables: GDP, share of industries on the GDP, a bunch of employment data. We have Brazil Central Bank information on number of commercial branch offices. We think that the more branch offices there are, the easier it is to get loans, right? So that could be something that affects BNDES loans, and also state and transfers to the cities. So we run a panel data. In the end, after excluding some municipalities, and we end up with 5,013 municipalities in 17 years, and we run fixed effect regressions. Here we have the party dummy, and here we have the coalition dummy. That's the fixed effects. And these are the other variables that could explain BNDES disbursement. So why is BNDES disbursements in municipality E at time T? Okay, and the first table we have is this. We run 5 different models, and we are actually interested in those guys here, the party dummy and the coalition dummy. We see that the coalition dummy tends to be significant. Every other variable has pretty straightforward interpretation for their coefficients. Of course, if you have a higher GDP, then you're going to have more BNDES loans. If you have industrial share of your GDP is high, then you're going to have more loans. So everything behaves as it should in these regressions. And we use lag GDP per capita and lag GDP. So the first 2 models, we use the total disbursement, and these 3 models we use total disbursements per capita. That's why we shift to GDP per capita. We use lag GDP so we don't have problems of simultaneity. And how can we interpret this number? This number is telling me that after controlling for a number of municipality attributes, we still have a part of the variation in the BNDES loans that is not explained by those variables. And it's telling me that basically allied municipalities get on average 1.6 million reais more per year from BNDES. Here we have per capita interpretation. So let's say model 4 is telling me that allied municipalities get 78 reais per capita more than non-allied ones from BNDES. So it's a evidence of political interference. Okay. Here's the continuation of this, because it would be too large and numbers will be too small, so I decided to divide. But basically that's it. That's the same table, and here we have some variables related to human capital. So we see that if the city has too much illiterate labor, then low human capital, and we have a negative coefficient here. It's significant, so it means that cities where labor is very unqualified, there's not going to be much economic activity there. There's not going to be industries, and it's negatively related to BNDES disbursements. But then when you move along here and you have more qualified labor, you see that the coefficients are positive. So if you have like incomplete high school, elementary school, then there is an indication that there's going to be more BNDES disbursements in those municipalities. Okay. Yeah, that's what I just mentioned, interpretation. This graph in this graph, we decided to depict the distribution of outlays. So we looked at the four administrations that were in that time span. First one was President Fernando Henrique, then Lula, then Rousseff, and then Temer. And for each of these periods, we divided the loans into allied and non-allied municipalities. Sorry, because this is in Portuguese here, but this is party, and this outside of party. Okay. And then if there is political interference, we were supposed to see a distribution slightly to the right, maybe to the left if I'm in this position, but a distribution slightly higher for allied municipalities as compared to the non-allied ones. And we see that here very clearly, Lula's government, and we see that a little bit here in Dilma, maybe a bit here in Temer. But this seems to be a period where there's the highest difference between allied and non-allied distribution of loans, right? So we decided to change the focus and look and run regressions, but we decided to divide government, each administration, and look what's happening on each of these administrations. And besides that, we also decided to look at the growth of disbursements, right? Instead of level, now we're going to look at growth. So our variable is growth of disbursements, growth of BNDES disbursements. And this graph is showing that also we divide allied municipalities and non-allied municipalities. And we see that there has been a much higher growth, or the disbursements had a higher growth on the allied municipalities. And mostly during this period here, which is Lula da Silva period. Okay, so we take as dependent variable the growth of BNDES disbursements, and we run a bunch of regressions, separate regressions. So let's see what happens. And this is all fixed effects estimation still, okay? Look, now we have coefficients for party and for coalition dummies. There's super highly significant party coefficient here in the Lula da Silva period, but not significant in the other periods, okay? In the other governments. So something was happening during that administration that perhaps they were privileging allied cities. Their bank was directing its loans to allied municipalities. So then we focus our attention on that period, and we do difference estimations, difference in differences. And we decided to take the 2008 election, which is right in the middle of Lula's term, right middle of here. In 2008, we had a municipal election for mayors. So we used that as our main event, right? So as a difference in difference estimation, we have the treated group and the non-treated group. And the treated group is municipalities that were not part, which mayor was not in the party of Lula, but then after the election, a mayor was elected which belongs to Lula's party. So this is the treatment. This is the group that received the effect of, normally we would call this a policy, but it's not policy, this is the election. So that's the group that you have the treatment. And then you would have a group that is untreated, and those would be the municipalities that were not, whose mayors were not from the ruling coalition. The mayors, they didn't have, they are not from Lula's party, neither before, neither after the election. It could be that another mayor from an opposition party was elected, or it could be that the same mayor was re-elected. It doesn't matter. It matters that either before and after the election, the mayor does not belong to the party of Brazil's president. So this is the control group or comparison group, right? And we run a difference in difference estimation. It's the simplest form. It's the canonical form. So we have 2 time periods, before and after the election, 2 groups such that no one is treated in the first period, but some units or some cities are treated in the second period. And the cities that are treated are the ones who shifted. They were not allied, and now they become allied. So we want to see if these guys had higher growth in their BNDES disbursements. And difference in difference will tell us that. Okay, so that's basic difference in difference estimation. We are interested in looking at the estimation of this B3 here. If it's significant, then it's telling us that municipalities that became allied after the election will have higher disbursements than the other ones. And basically we are controlling for a time fixed effect, which is this, and a group fixed effect, which is this. Okay, so that's basic difference in difference. And this is a descriptive statistics. So the difference in difference, the result of this is average, right? So you basically, you want to see if after the election, allied municipalities have more money from BNDES than non-allied municipalities. But part of that could be because there was a growth in disbursements anyway. So part of that would be just a result of this trend. And we want to filter that with the difference in difference. So we take the difference, we look at the treatment group, and we look at the growth after the election and subtract from the growth before the election. And we do the same with the untreated group. And then we take the difference of that. And we have something like 75.94. That would be the growth in per capita, the average per capita growth of disbursements that is due to the treatment. That is due to the fact that municipality now is an allied one. So you're an allied municipality, okay, take more money. And that's the amount of money per capita. But we have to see if these things are significant, have statistical significance. And we do 3 alternative setups here. We do just a basic ordinary least square estimation. Now we are estimating this equation. And we do 2 semi-parametric models that's proposed by Heckman, Ishimura, and Todd, 1997. One is a kernel model where local polynomial semi-parametric kernels moving with a Panachnikov function. And the other is a kernel. It's a 2-stage estimation. So it estimates the probability of a city being treated and then use this estimated probability in a classical propensity score matching. So kernel PS stands for propensity score. And then these are the results. With a simple linear model, OLS, we don't have statistical significance. But with the other models, statistical significance shows up here. And basically, they are all stating that the growth in BNDES disbursement is higher for the treated, and it's higher at around 70, 80 Brazilian reais per capita. That's higher growth comparing treated and non-treated. And just as a final, this is basically robustness checking. So there is that possibility of having non-parallel trends in difference estimation. So this is a, this guy, Freyhaldenhoven, in a paper from 2019, he suggests a way of tackling this problem of non-parallel trends, because the thing is, you can have different trends before the treatment, even with no treatment. One group of cities could have their disbursements, the BNDES disbursements, growing at a faster rate than the other group. So it's a way to tackle that thing, but the idea, the results are showing that the results are robust. So this table is showing that we got similar results than with the different estimation. So we can pretty much conclude that the treatment, which is changing sides in election, will give municipalities more disbursements per capita. Okay. So conclusions. I don't know. How am I in time? 10 minutes. Okay, that was good. Cities with mayors that are friends of Brazil's president have higher BNDES disbursements per year than cities with mayor that oppose the president. That's panel data estimation. We are looking at levels, not growth. But when we look at growth, also we find evidence of political interference. We find that municipalities that change sides on the 2008 election, they had a higher growth of disbursement after the election. And some sort of policy recommendation, would be that change the fact that CEOs of public banks are vulnerable to political pressures, somehow giving them more political independence. That could be either by giving them a fixed term in which they can be fired by the politician who put them into office. I think that could be the main policy recommendation of our findings. Yeah. So that's it.
Okay, so it's time for the Q&A. We have around 10 minutes left.
So can you go back to the first slide of the different results?
Okay.
Yeah.
This one?
Yes, this one. So one of my comments is that like the different results seem to be driven by the difference in growth rate before the election rather than after the election.
Yes.
Right.
Difference. So we see that before the election, we had actually a negative growth on disbursements.
Yeah.
And after the election, we have positive growth for the two groups. And the difference we'll try to see, okay, so which part of this change is due to the treatment and which part is just due to the difference in, of behavior before the election.
Yeah, but I think my concern is that the dip in like actually the difference in growth rate before it's quite large for both group, right? And it's smaller after the election.
Yes.
I think like one possible explanation is that, let's say it's not like the loan allocation, but more like the economic growth, right? It could be that the difference in the period before that drive the election result, right? In the municipality that have lower growth rate, right? The people are not happy with the mayor, so they switch the side, right? So could that be the problem in your estimation that actually even after the election, the President Lula doesn't very.
So you mean growth rate of GDP or growth rate of you mean growth rate of disbursements?
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean the growth rate of the disbursement, right?
Disbursement.
I mean, like the people in the, I don't know. I mean, somehow the people are not happy with the previous mayor, so they switch sides. And the reason why they are not happy because they are the municipality that have like the negative growth rate of that part.
Yeah. So you mean that the treated guys, they switched sides because they were having very intense reduction of disbursements before the election, right?
Yeah. So I mean, my concern is that like that the allocation between treatment and control group are not random, right? So
It's not random. Yes.
It's not. It could drive it the other way.
That's why this is a semi-experiment. That's how they call, right? Because you cannot randomly assign. It's given to you.
Yeah, but usually we compare like the treat and the control group before, and usually we like to see that if both groups have the similar characteristic before the treat period. Right?
Yeah.
But in this case, it's quite different. So I'm a little bit. My question is that it could go the other way. The election result drive by the allocation of loan before, right? I mean, even after the election, the loan allocation is quite similar, right? So then the explanation could go the other way.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we don't have the ability to choose groups. They are what they are, right? So we can design an experiment in which the behavior of the two groups before the election is similar because they are what they are. We want the treatment. We want the guys who changed sides and the untreated ones, the ones that don't. I'm not sure. I'm not a specialist in difference. Actually, my co-author did this part. But from what I know, maybe what you're saying could be due to a difference in the trends before the election. So you could have maybe different trends. Could you think that could be the case? Like if you have one group with a trend of reducing of a reduction in BNDES outlays that is too much different from the other group, so then you would be violating that parallel trends idea, right? Is that could that be it?
I think my question is not about the trend, right? Because here in the left-hand side variable is the growth rate of the loan, right? So it the change.
Okay.
Why the left-hand side variable is the growth rate, right? So it's just different growth rate. So it's kind of like different level just before the
But that's the nature of the difference in difference estimation, right? You want to sort of filter from the difference after the event, the difference that existed before the event. So then you can have a better idea of what part of that difference after the event that is due to the event. So I don't know if there is a problem by the fact that they are too different before the election, because that's part of the tool, right? They have to be different. I don't know. So okay.
So you mentioned that there is a better governance in 2019 onwards. So I'm just wondering if there's any evidence. Is there any evidence of like better allocation, like the sector?
Yes, that's a good point. I think there is. Our investigation goes until 2019, but actually we eliminate that year from our analysis, so we go all the way up to 2018. So we don't see in our data any improvement because it precedes, our data set precedes that congressional investigation. But I'm pretty sure there is improved governance. I don't know the detail of it, but I think they have new guidelines in their website, and those guidelines are more restrictive in terms of distribution of loans, although they are all in Portuguese. You might not be able to download it and look at it, but they are there, and yeah.
I might have missed this, but did you control for like government investment within those regions? So, you know, like if they're allied with the government, then
Should turn that on. Do you want to use this?
it's okay. More than other opposition municipalities, right? So
Yes.
the more higher reimbursement of funds, but
You mean that there could be some time dependency? Because in the past there was more loans or more economic activity then? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that could be. You mean the mayor used the budget, the city budget, to fund projects and take BNDES loans. Yeah, BNDES loans could finance city projects, but that's all included in the data because we don't look at just private loans. We look at all the loans that were dumped by BNDES in that city at each point in time. So that is captured by the data. If there is public projects there with BNDES money, it's going to be in the data. It's going to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my point is related to this point. So it's a mechanism why they allocate more loans to the, you know, to the of just trying to seize the people in the area. So, for example, if the ruling government comes in and say they want to focus on this industry, car industry, and the car industry tend to be located in their area, and therefore there's no question that the loan wouldn't be dispersed more, because the area where the leader come from is an area where it's a central of the policy.
Okay, you mean where it comes from is his political birthplace? Is that what you mean? Like, okay, so this guy's from this state, so he wants to, he would like the bank to pour more money in that area because he's from there, he has friends there. Is that what you're saying? Okay, not where the leader comes from, but the areas that are friends with the leader. Well, that's a good question, but we can't answer that. We only, all we can do is look at the data and let the data tells us what's going on. And what's going on is that places that are friends receive more money. But if that is in the president's policy, or if it's disclosed or not, then we don't go through that. Because you're right, it could be that the president is elected, and during his campaign, he said, okay, so if I'm elected, I'm going to go through this and this project, which happens to be in my friends' cities, cities where my friend, but okay, it's totally justifiable because he was elected disclosing that, right? That's your point, right? So then, but we don't have any saying about that. I think it's a possibility. It's a legitimate, perhaps a legitimate way of disbursing money because it was disclosed before the election, right? And if that's the case, then you're right. Then there's no bias, or the bias is explicit, right? If I'm elected, I'm going to pour money here, not there. And okay, so if you guys voted on me, you're fine with that, right? Yeah. So. I would have to look at BNDES data if they had. The data is micro level data, so I don't remember